Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cara Romano, and I'm the Executive Editor of Consumer Goods Technology. I would like to welcome you all to today's web seminar, a continuing part of the Consumer Goods Web Connection series. We appreciate you taking some time out of your schedules to join us today, and would especially like to thank Sama Technologies for their support in sponsoring this event. Today, we will be reviewing the results of our annual Tech Trends research, which is conducted in conjunction with Gartner Research. We've been publishing this research for over 17 years, and the year-over-year trends are really quite interesting. So what we've done today is we've selected a few key topics, and I'm pleased to have three industry experts joining me. They'll share their perspectives on each topic, and we'll have time for Q&A in the middle. So our first speaker will be Stephen Smith, who is the Managing VP with Gartner Research, who has management responsibility for the manufacturing and retail industry segments. In addition, Steve covers strategy, strategic planning, trade promotion management and optimization, and retail execution for consumer products manufacturers. Steve has more than 18 years of sales and marketing experience in the grocery, retail, consumer products, and advertising industries. Prior to joining Gartner, he was a VP of marketing for Stop & Shop supermarkets, and before that, he held senior marketing and sales management roles at Quaker Oats. Our second speaker will be Tony Bender, who is the CIO and VP of Global Business Services at Edgewell Personal Care, where he leads the global IT organization and the global business services pertaining to indirect procurement and HR. Tony joined Energizer Holdings in 2012 as VP and Chief Information Officer, and the company was split into two parts this past summer. Tony has been instrumental in launching and directing numerous strategic initiatives to establish a culture of innovation through the adoption of information technology and business process improvement. Those initiatives include ERP standardization and consolidation to SAP, Hyperion Financial Management and Planning, SAP Business Intelligence, multiple acquisition integrations, and the EHI separation projects. Tony's previous roles include VP of IT for Unilever and VP and CIO for Alberto Culver. And third, but certainly not least, is Phil Hodgson, the VP and General Manager of the High-Tech Practice at Sama Technologies. Phil is a 30-year veteran of high-tech firms, having worked and consulted for some of the most dynamic growth companies in Silicon Valley, including PeopleSoft, Oracle, Tandem Computers, and DEC. Phil has a strong interest, both academically and professionally, in the new age of analytics and big data. He believes that data-driven enterprises can fundamentally transform themselves into new opportunities and top-line revenue growth. Phil's mission is to help his clients execute new strategies to achieve growth in ways that they never thought possible. So as with all of our events, one of our goals is to make them as interactive as possible and to get as much feedback from you throughout. So please notice the Q&A function on the left side below the presenter headshots. Please use this feature to ask questions of the speakers throughout the webinar, as we will be pausing for questions after each section. The slides and the research report itself can be downloaded from the tab at the top of your screen, and a replay will be available on our website for many platforms, including smartphones and tablets. So with that, I'd like to thank you all again for your time today, and let's get going. So Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cara. This morning what I'd like to do is highlight some of the trends from the technology report that was recently published. I'd also like to engage with my fellow speakers in some questions around what they are seeing as it relates to this changing environment. At Gartner, we're seeing an improved confidence in the economy amongst consumer goods companies that's driven really by the kinds of decisions that they're making from a technology standpoint. What we're seeing is a balance of operational technologies as well as those delivering more analytical and optimization through powerful predictive models. So what follows this morning is a view of some highlights of insights around technology trends, as well as a discussion around key things that are happening in the market. So a couple of headlines. The collision of the Internet of Things and the forces of mobile, social, cloud, and information have substantially changed the environment that consumer companies face and is driving significant opportunities. While we've seen innovation rates that have largely not improved, it's because consumers are distracted and bombarded by information, messages, and choices. The multi-channel environment makes connecting with consumers more complicated, but puts them in control. As we review major trends in the marketplace, there are a few things that I think need to be highlighted. First is the importance of building direct and meaningful relationships with consumers. Secondly, a new and heightened call for more effective collaboration with retail partners is the price of competing effectively in the future. Both will require sophisticated leveraging of information and analytics going forward. It is our view that digital business is here. Digital business is growing. Right now, about 22% of organizational leaders say that they are currently doing some form of digital business. In just a couple of years, that rises to 50% of businesses that intend to be in digital business in 24 months. And in 3 to 5 years, that number is over 80%. The highest priority for digital business is growth, which will result in higher visibility for all members of the organization. Digital business is not just about technology, it's really about growth. The question we often ask our clients is, are you ready for this? For CG companies especially, the distinctions between the customer, the retailer, and the manufacturer are coming together. Using the power of digital technologies, many consumer goods manufacturers are reaching out and selling directly to consumers. Retailers, through their own private brands, are becoming, in some ways, indistinguishable from manufacturers. And even customers are getting in the game as they use peer-to-peer sites such as eBay, Quirky, or Etsy, and are acting like manufacturers and retailers together. Easy access to technology is making it possible for consumers to become competitors. To stay ahead of this wave, CG manufacturers will have to think differently about how they as enterprises consume and use technology. But first, perhaps let's step back and see what we mean by digital business. The nexus of forces enables a foundation for digital business. The mutually reinforcing combination of social, mobile, cloud, and information technologies are enabling new types of applications that bring the power of people and information to us wherever we need it, whenever we need it. The Internet of Things, on the other hand, is the accelerant. In the not-so-distant future, everything of value that can be instrumented will be instrumented. Even the not-so-smart things will be able to sense the surrounding environment and communicate that information to other things or people. Smart machines will be able to analyze contextual information and act upon that information, becoming, in many circumstances, active participants. In 2009, there were over 1.6 billion personal devices and almost a billion Internet-connected things. And in 2020, Gartner estimates that there will be over 7 billion personal devices and 30 billion Internet-connected things. Internet-connected things will outnumber connected people by over 5 to 1. That's a new world and creates new dynamics. The collision of the nexus of forces in the Internet of Things spawns digital business, which is the blurring of the virtual and physical worlds and is altering how people and things interact to conduct business. We define digital business as the creation of new business designs that will be driven by bringing the digital and physical worlds together. It's all about a seamless exchange and communication between people, things, and business. It is our view that you will likely need to rethink your risk posture. Adoption of technology has been steady. CG manufacturers tend not to jump into new technologies and then make sudden changes. On the average, we've seen only modest increases in the level of interest in investing. We expect this to remain largely the case into the future. The advent of digital business does not mean that you'll need to be out on the bleeding edge all of the time. However, you should be aware that both your traditional competitors and new competitors that will come at you from new places and different industries are likely to be willing to take more risk than you are. As we look into the future, we really believe that the smart home can be the new frontier for consumer goods companies. The technology from digital business creates the capability for consumers' home to be a major driver in how this industry evolves over time. With the large number of devices that would be connected within a smart home, and we think that could be over 500 smart objects, it will become an important battleground for brands and retailers as you look to sell your consumer goods to consumers in a different environment. So, Kara, why don't I turn it back to you for a moment for questions?
Great. Thank you, Steve. Those were a lot of connected devices there, and that 5-to-1 ratio is frankly a little scary. So first question for you, I guess, is just a general one. How do you see this digital business, if those really are the numbers, playing out in consumer goods? So are brand owners ready for this, and do you expect to see any of those tendencies to change? Will they continue to be risk averse, or do you think we'll start to see some investments in some of this newer technology?
I think we're going to see a little bit of both, Kara. I think there's going to be many companies that stay nervous, and I think that's going to be dangerous. What we think is important is embedding the digital in both physical products, combining digital capabilities to provide new services or value for the customer, and using digital to gain new understanding and insight. There are already some examples out there. For example, the Coca-Cola Freestyle machine provides consumers with a substantially greater number of choices and opportunities for engagement, as well as providing insight and a testing ground for the company. Diageo has announced a pilot almost 9 months ago that would allow for customized marketing messages, which would give greater supply chain insight into how their products are moving through the supply chain. And SteadyServe iKeg uses sensors and a mobile app to keep track of how full a keg of beer is, which helps the inventory and out of stock. So for those who are sitting back and waiting, the answer is that many companies are already starting to pilot and experiment with how digital business plays out. And some of those companies are actually outside of the industries that we normally look to for our competition. So in general, I think we're going to see digital business is going to create some sort of shakeout in the industry.
Let me go back before I move on. I want to bring in Tony and Phil in a second, but before I do, can you comment on the smart home? That's where you ended. So given especially that we are talking about the consumer goods industry, I look around at my house and there's all these products from all these consumer goods, these branded manufacturers. Are they going to start talking to each other and back to the retailer, back to the manufacturer? How do you see the smart home evolving?
The smart home gets put together in service of the consumer ultimately. We're finding them where they are and when they're ready to interact with an enterprise is really crucial. And if a consumer wants their home to manage itself in some ways, as we've seen with the Nest thermometer as an example, that's how they're going to want to play this out. And so those who don't want to engage in the smart home need to realize that there are going to be companies that get after it. So just a couple of examples I think would be relevant, which is there's a smart pill bottle which is made by AdhereTech, and it has a smart stamp on when that cap opens and closes, and measures how much is remaining in that bottle afterwards. So that provides both the company and the consumer a real value, and for anybody competing against them, they've missed that extra service that's added to it. LG has a washer which can almost serve as its own diagnostic technician when something goes wrong, figuring out the source of the problem and then connecting with the company where necessary. Many of us work with our printers, and HP has had this service around ordering ink online, and Amazon has this handheld device called Dash, which allows for ordering directly back to the internet. So what's happening is that digital devices are connecting with the products and the machines in the home in order to change the way consumers buy products. It's not just going to be online. It's not just going to be mobile commerce, and it's not going to be just in store. The home will become another channel.
Okay, let's bring Tony into this conversation. If the home's another channel, and we're talking about the digital business as Steve described it, are companies like yours ready for this onslaught? What kind of new disruptive models do you see coming on the horizon, Tony? Let's start with you.
Okay, Kara. For us at Edgewell, we're in the personal care business. So we're in wet shave with Schick Wilkinson Sword, and sun care and fem care with Playtex, Stay Free, Carefree, Banana Boat, Hawaiian Tropics. So we're in the personal care space. So in the case of the smart home itself, there could be possibilities for us to leverage this, unlike household products that are probably more relevant food in the terms of consumption. I think to some degree it's going to be a consumption-based scenario of how can you link that back to your product and use that information in order to drive replenishment. But for us, as far as disruption, what we're seeing as an example is subscription models are playing a key role of disruption now in the shaving business, as an example, with a new channel in effect, this whole pure play subscription model like Dollar Shave Club, Harry's, 1-800-RAZOR. And we're viewing this as being something that we're taking very seriously, because also our other retail customers are taking it seriously. And fundamentally, right now, we're viewing these as channels. They're new channels. We do private label manufacturing in the wet shave business for the largest in the world. So we view these new channel players as customers of ours. But we're also aware that as this thing matures in the subscription model business, we're going to need to adapt, and and also we've had discussions of should we be a retailer in this regard. We've got a key competitor in Cincinnati that has entered into that market. We've decided not to go there yet, but it's something that we'll be monitoring. So for us right now, the subscription model is one of the most disruptive new entrants into the scene with wet shave.
Great, thanks, Tony. I agree that the direct-to-consumer piece is something I think that most consumer goods companies are wrestling with right now. For fear of pissing off the retailer, on one hand, but then being able to have a direct connection with the consumer. So let's bring you into this conversation. As the data guy in analytics, I want to go back to what Steve said about that direct relationship with the consumers. So should CPG companies be making investments in those kind of relationships, in that sentiment analysis? How do I capture all that information and figure out how to act on it?
That's a great question. I'll say, for Sommer's perspective, I've got two answers to that question. The first is in what I'll call measuring sentiment analysis, and with the measurement of your brand penetration is. So the ability to understand why someone likes your brand, what are the strengths and weaknesses of their brand in relation to competitors, is really important to track in real time in the marketplace today. I was really struck by the keynote speaker at the CGT conference in Orlando last week when he talked about a leaky bucket. And he talked about how a lot of vendors just keep on pouring trade promotion money into the leaky bucket without understanding why you're losing market share and the reasons for losing market share. The ability to use sentiment analysis and combine it with what your sales volume is, you'll understand why you're losing market share, why you're gaining market share. So sentiment analysis speaks right to the heart of the consumer and the direct feedback in real time on how much to like your product. So that would be the first answer. The second has to do with the work that Sama is doing with Cisco Technologies. We work with all of their networks on predictive and prescriptive analytics. So let me give you a scenario for the home. Let's suppose that I have a Cisco network that connects to your refrigerator in your home. You'll be able to tell what the temperature is in the refrigerator. You'll be able to look at the cycles of the compressor in the refrigerator, so you know whether the refrigerator might be losing its motor or coolant, and send out a repair technician automatically on a subscription model, for example. But you know what else I'll know? I'll know how many times you open that refrigerator every single day. I'll know how often you open perhaps the vegetable section. I'll know if you open the freezer. I'll know if you're going to take ice cream out or not. I'll know all these things. And I can't imagine that any consumer goods manufacturer that sells ice cream or sells bologna or sells Coca-Cola or Pepsi or soda or fruit or vegetables wouldn't want to know that information. And it's going to be right at your fingertips. And using that information about real-time usage patterns will allow you to predict demand in your neighborhoods, thereby stocking your shelves more efficiently.
They'll also know that my teenage son opens the refrigerator door 100 times a day, right? Okay, so the smart home is certainly going to be one of the things we watch out for. The digital business, as Steve described it, will certainly be another, and see how that impact is. So, Steve, let's move on to the next section. I'm going to turn it back to you to really look at the specific areas of investment and the different business processes that people are spending money on.
So the real big question here is, are we spending enough, and are we spending on the right things? Gartner produces a set of data called IT Key Metrics, and we deliver more than 2,000 metrics across 21 different industries, including the consumer goods vertical. This picture here is not entirely exciting in the sense that it looks like IT as a percent of revenue has not increased very greatly, and the percentage changes have not moved that directly. What it indicates is that we haven't really necessarily changed our posture as it relates to investment from an industry. But it's much more interesting if we actually look at this in more detail and get down to specific applications where consumer goods companies are actually putting their investment priorities. The list shows the top technologies are largely focused on engaging with consumers, led by consumer mobile applications, digital marketing analytics, master data management, social media marketing platforms, as well as trade promotion optimization. This trend continues and is augmented by studies such as the one done by Nielsen that analyzed over 100 million trade promotions and determined that only a third of those are actually making money, which makes the consumer direct connection really important. As a result, companies are spending more money on consumer-centric technologies, and some of them are focused on retailer execution because there's not a direct link in many cases when we're selling our products. What's key is balancing the need to improve sales and marketing capabilities with shoppers and consumers as well as retailers. Keep in mind some of the fundamental capabilities like master data management are still really relevant. Data fuels this whole thing, and how we store and use and protect that data is critical. I'm going to show you for context the rest of the list here. While there's a clear break here between the top of the list, what you can see is that there is a lot of spending across a lot of different areas, and there is a shift from one year to the next in terms of what companies are thinking are important. And as we highlighted at the beginning of this session around digital business, we are seeing that shift that's being reflected in the spending decisions for digital business. We also survey supply chain officers, and we've identified a couple of primary areas for technology investment, and that's demand management, supply chain analytics, and supply chain visibility. What we see is that digital business models will require better capabilities in sensing that demand and understanding where products are within the supply chain so that visibility becomes absolutely crucial as we move forward. There's still tremendous opportunity for improvement in this area, and as new players get involved in these supply chains, the complexity of managing a supply chain becomes even more critical. It also, as we change and go direct to consumer, leverage mobile more, our visibility of where product is in the supply chain, how quickly it can move to another location, and how that links up to the end consumer demand is also highly critical. So we see some changes here, but largely the money is being spent in understanding that demand and understanding from a visibility standpoint what consumers are looking for and where they're looking for it. So Kara, why don't I turn it back to you again for questions?
Okay, great. That was a really long list, so let me ask you for a little bit of let's go under the covers to the next level. So what trends are really driving those investments today? We talked obviously before about the digital business. You talked about the consumer-facing technology really being the biggest areas of investment. So what else is shaping that list, and why is it changing so much if the total dollars, as you said, really aren't changing?
So, Kara, we see three key engagement trends driving investment decisions at today's consumer goods companies. First is that building of direct relationships to customers. Two is a renewed interest in manufacturer and retailer collaboration. And three, the exploding world of information and analytics. At a very basic level, capabilities are different today than they were in the past, and they're improving. Getting the basics right and creating an opportunity and even a war chest to innovate is critical. What's happened over time with slow innovation rates is we've not been able to invest in our businesses in the way that is absolutely vital to draw growth, and we've allowed things like trade promotion to creep upwards even though the performance that we're getting out of those promotions is not increasing. Some interesting things that we're seeing that actually help in this world are technologies like image recognition at shelf to improve data collection and retail execution. Crowdsourcing is actually becoming more real as we look out to innovation. Nike's using digital to transform every aspect of the product and creation process, like Nike ID, which is a service that is provided to allow customers to personalize and design their own merchandise. Heineken's tapping into consumers for ideas on sustainable packaging and even new nightclub designs. Volvo's launched a Facebook ad that asks drivers to reveal how they're using the space within their cars in a bid to design more personalized vehicles and make them work better for their most important customers. Even the military is getting into this. The Wall Street Journal recently reported that they're considering using crowdsourcing to update their marine amphibious vehicles. So what we see happening is a new willingness from consumer goods companies and others to look at how consumers are using products, engaging in their environment. And what's really important about this is it's not just consumer goods companies that are doing this. It's providers of technology. It's folks from outside the industry that are actually driving this. So looking sideways as well as forwards and backwards will be critical in the future.
Okay, so speaking of that sideways look, Tony, let's talk about what you guys are doing for some of those business processes. Specifically, I want to ask about retail execution and some of the in-store technology, things that you really need to have in place, really foundational, to act on that consumer sentiment. So what are you guys doing in regards to retail execution? It's one of the hottest topics we have here at CGT.
Yeah, Kara, and it's an area that we're really interested in, particularly in regards to consumption. The reality is that in consumer goods, we're always interested in what's occurring at point of sale, and gathering Nielsen data, point of sale, shipment data, and also one thing that is eluding many of us is around e-commerce and this sort of missing element that is making up the full composite of what share is, and it's a growing part of share. So one of the things that we're looking at is a demand signal repository, and how do we address that? Something that we've pulled disparate elements together, but it's something that, as we move forward, we're pulling under the moniker of perfect store, really looking at, starting with consumption data. How do you define a demand repository to store all that consumption data? And then how do you use analytics in order to really, and other tools that could be done in store in regards to merchandising tools, to really understand your planogram, inventory levels in store, and determine out of stock so that you can reduce out of stocks and better leverage trade investments that are being made with retailers in order to ensure that you're driving the greatest amount of revenue possible given the amounts of trade spend that we're making. So this whole concept of a perfect store is something that is on our roadmap for fiscal 16. We'll be spending a fair amount of energy on it, but it's something that we view as being very important in order to drive top-line growth and make sure that we're getting the greatest efficiency possible.
Tony, I'm sorry, Kara. It's Steve. I just had a follow-up on that, if you would. There's some great tools out there, and I just was curious as to what your guys' sense of how ready your sales organizations are to adopt these tools to help you improve your business.
Well, I think that that's always a challenge, because the reality is that field sales and really linking to merchandising in store is always a challenge. We use brokers, a broker network in some degree in North America, and we use distributors in some other parts of the world. And so we really have a mixed bag. We've got internal sales, we've got brokers, we've got distributors, and so I think that for our sales organization, I think that there's a growing interest in it because we are, organic top-line growth is becoming a very critical element of our business. So, and it's something that historically we haven't rewarded our sales organization. We've been more of an operating profit-driven organization. So I think we're not unlike many other companies in consumer goods now, is that we're seeking growth, top-line growth, and so I think that the reality is that sales and the commercial organizations are becoming more open to that because of the importance of it within most of our businesses.
This is Carol. One follow-up question to that then. So if you're talking about a demand signal repository to bring this data together for lots of different organizations, including sales, to use, demand signal repository, when we first started talking about it, was really a place for execution data, for point-of-sale data, for transactional data. Are you envisioning incorporating some of the additional data types that Steve talked about, some of the digital pieces, the consumer-specific pieces?
Well, I think that it is something that we'll be looking at in, as an extension of, the business in regards to sentiment data and things of that nature. I think, right now we have a fairly large global trade promotion management program that's underway. Obviously, that consumption data is going to be critical to account planning and putting together an overall, TPM program. And so we see there being a great linkage between a demand signal repository, what we're doing with account planning, what we're doing with financial planning, what we're doing with demand planning, and the intersect of all of that. But we do believe that there's a lot of data in regards to sentiment data through social that we can pull in and that we can link back to that consumption data so that we have better understanding of causals.
Okay, so to pull Phil into the conversation then, there's a lot of data types that Tony just rattled off there and a lot of analysis that has to be done. So what sort of investments should companies be looking at to make sense of all that data? What kind of advanced analytics are really, we hear about predictive all the time. What should they be making investments in?
So Tony and Kara, those are great questions. And I think looking at all of the data out there and all the different data types, shaping the data is important, but the data has to feed what I'll call an e-machine learning algorithm engine or a modern data analytics platform. All the data's got to come in a certain format, including sentiment data, which is unstructured. So the marriage of structured and unstructured data, bringing in sentiment data, being able to bring in point-of-sale data, and then be able to take a machine learning algorithm that can make billions of decisions in a few seconds along multivariate analysis planes. So this very advanced applied mathematics allows brand managers to know what trade promotion is working and why is it working and what channels and what location of the country and what population types. And you'll be able to get within, a half of a standard deviation in understanding how your trade spend is actually going to be working. Today it's done in arrears. In the future, and in the clients that Sam is working with today, we'll be able to actively predict and prescribe what kind of trade spend, for what channels, for what population types, and we'll know very accurately ahead of time, looking at the DSR, for example, and applying it to the e-machine learning algorithms, what the outcome is going to be. So it's the right investment in technology for the right product. I mean, it's a 2% spend in IT for CPG companies, but the trade promotion spend is in the 15 to 20%. If you want to stop the leaky buckets, invest in the tools that allow you to predict how to spend your trade promotion spend to maximize your top-line revenue growth.
Perfect, and that's a good lead-in back to you, Steve, to really get into the next section, which is where will you find competitive advantage? Where are those other investments? Where should those other investments be?
Thanks, Kara. So there's been a lot of references today about competing differently, and that's why deciding very clearly where you're going to spend and focus is critical if you're to look for competitive advantage. We spoke a little bit about mobile and e-commerce earlier in this session. Our research has identified the impact of a shift in revenue mix on how customers shop across the various channels. And what you see in the chart here is that largely the store is still on the top of the heap here. They're the king, if you will, of where commerce is being done. But as we look out to our forecast, we see that it's moved up to over 25% of commerce will be done either mobilely or through e-commerce. Smaller areas like the smart home or perhaps an autonomous vehicle would fit in some of those larger, the smaller bars up at the top of this chart. So we continue to see that the store will continue to be the hub, if you will, and provide the largest percentage of retail revenue. But what's really interesting is that retailers are now estimating that close to 50% of their brick and mortar retail sales were influenced in some way, shape, or form by customer activity in e-commerce and mobile channels. This represents a huge shift since just a couple of years ago, where this figure was about half as much of that. So we're seeing a shift in the way customers are approaching channels. We're seeing a shift in the way retailers are managing their channels. Historically, they've looked at those channels as separate entities run by separate groups, and they had separate P&Ls. Today, there is a much greater understanding that there is a linkage between how commerce gets done in each channel, as well as how commerce gets influenced in each channel. So we would expect, as we look out beyond 2017, for this channel mix to continue to shift, for there to be more channels and places where commerce is being done, but we would still expect the store to be at the top of the heap. Let's take a look at optimization. Phil talked a little bit about some pretty amazing capabilities that would drive to much better decisions, particularly in an area where CG companies are spending a tremendous amount of money, and that's in trade promotion management. Today, promotions are not largely effective. There are companies who are actually making great progress, moving beyond the typical putting a promotion out there, trying to get as many cases moved through that promotion, and on the retail side, trying to get as much money to run those promotions as possible. There are companies that are doing something which we've talked about as optimization or collaborative planning, but unfortunately, as we survey the major body of consumer goods companies, optimization is often not at the forefront of what they're thinking about. There's a lot going on when promotions are negotiated, and the goals of each party are frequently very different. The full ultimate health and performance of the category, understanding where the brand is going or where the store is going in the future, is usually not part of that short-term calculus, as our data shows here. What we have to think about when we look at optimization is it is not just about generating insights, and it is certainly not about just looking backwards. It's about the ability to be predictive about outcomes and to be predictive in real time. The companies that we talked about, unfortunately, just don't have that as part of their ongoing way of running their business, although some are really starting to make some traction here. As Phil spoke, this really has a lot to do with data and analytics, and one of the survey's questions that we ask of CIOs across consumer goods companies is BI and analytics part of their top technology priority? Many years, in the past couple of years, we've lived through a very difficult time, and the focus has been on cost savings and efficiency. And what we're beginning to see is that many companies are fully engaged, and that number is increasing in data and analytics projects and their deployment. We've seen that as we look at our hype cycle and look at optimization across various different technologies. And it is what we're seeing is that leaders who have personal responsibility in selecting new applications are making sure that the right kind of data and data that comes from unstructured and structured places is part of how these projects are being put together. There's no question, as we look forward, that information and analytics will become the currency of differentiation. Having a comprehensive approach is really the only way to realize that advantage. So I wanted to end by highlighting, as we started, the digital business is going to frame the way consumer companies compete in the next decade. The environment is not necessarily going to get any easier for anybody, but new opportunities will certainly abound. It is key to get connected with consumers and improve our ability to collaborate with our retail partners. So, Kara, I'll turn it back to you for any final questions we might have.
Great. I just want to go back to the first slide in this section where you talked about the brick and mortar piece being 50%, having 50% of those sales influenced by some sort of online or digital activity. Yeah, this one. So how is e-commerce evolving then for consumer goods companies? Do you see that brick and mortar piece going away, or will the influence piece just continue to grow?
I don't think we see brick and mortar going away. In fact, we've seen a number of online-only players experimenting with how they build a physical presence. I think there's a new understanding that there's value to that physical presence. We're not all going to be sitting around in our slippers drinking a glass of wine, ordering everything from home. In fact, as a society, we're very mobile, so we're in our automobiles quite a bit of the time, and in public transportation. And our ability to conduct our personal business wherever we might be becomes really very critical. So what there will be from a retail standpoint is probably even greater ability to build some competitive advantage by having multiple channels. And as I said, this is why I think some of the pure plays are experimenting with different ways to have a physical presence. For CG companies, I think it's imperative to experiment carefully, because certainly becoming a competitor with your customer is fraught with risk. But it is the new world, and at some level, how we collaborate and engage with retailers across these multiple channels as consumer goods companies can change the way we play in the future as well.
I assume you're talking about that direct-to-consumer piece. So how do you see that playing out? Do you think it will continue to grow? 10 years ago, we all probably would have had a much bigger percentage on that chart for that piece, and it's just taken a long time. Is it because of the fear of competing with the customer?
I think it's partially because of the fear. It's also partially because it's a different way of doing business. And I had the privilege of working inside a retailer for a number of years, and it took us forever to realize that our e-commerce business was really just another channel for us. We thought about it as a separate business. They made their separate decisions. They bought products on their own schedule and based on what they thought the needs were, as opposed to trying to optimize the combination of those channels for folks. So I think what consumer goods companies need to think about is not only do I go direct to consumers with certain products, and I think certain products are probably more friendly to direct than other products. The aggregating function of a retailer for certain kinds of products is still fairly relevant. But there are probably products that can go direct and can save some money inside the supply chain for the customer, which makes it difficult for the retailer in some ways to compete from a price standpoint if we eliminate one more step in the chain. So I think it'll be two things, Kara. I think it'll be both more direct to consumers from consumer goods companies on specific kinds of categories, and it will also be a different level of collaboration with either current retail partners or others. And as we look out, certainly the bartering economy and the reuse economy of products is changing, and that's not a retail-driven phenomenon. That's driven outside of retail on products that have already been manufactured and may be refurbished and reused. So I think it'll come from a bunch of different areas.
Right, and I think that a lot of manufacturers can help retail customers who may have started to go off, as you said, with a different channel, so different e-commerce versus brick and mortar, and are now struggling to bring that back together. So things like MDM, things like just foundational elements that can really help the omnichannel experience for the consumer through the retailer with the support of the manufacturer. Okay, so Tony and Phil, I want to bring you guys back in here also. Tony, let's talk about analytics, because obviously that's been a big piece of everything that we've talked about this morning. So what are you guys doing in the area of analytics, and where do you see this going kind of long term?
Well, Kara, as I was mentioning before, to a large degree, a lot of this comes back to data and data accuracy, and consumption data is at the heart of that for a lot of the things that we're looking to do on really understanding share and how we measure it. But in addition to that, with our global trade promotion management project underway, that on the analytics side, one of the key, the size of the prize of trade, as was mentioned earlier, is massive. And so for any consumer goods company, this is an area of focus. And so we have an initiative underway now where beyond account planning, standard checkbook functions, and deduction management, trade promotion analytics or post-event analytics is going to be key to that. We've scratched the surface with post-event analytics previously, but we're really planning to kick that up to another level, first in North America with another set of tools. And then also looking at trade promotion optimization, or really looking at sort of predictive modeling of what can we do on the trade side in order to really drive the agenda and really, with the intent of being more efficient in those with trade and then reinvesting that to drive top-line growth. Marketing mix modeling is a key element of that, but we're also looking on the supply chain side, looking at global inventory and slow-moving and obsolete, and ways of exposing that to our sales organization and to our distributor network, so that inventory can be moved in a much faster way. Obviously, inventory, not aging well, and so the more we can get that in front from a real-time standpoint. To a large degree, a lot of what we're focusing on is what is our BI and analytics strategy and how are we going to drive that. And one of the things that we're very excited about are memory resident technologies, which allow us to really put lots of data in memory and have much faster speeds in that regard. And I think that the day of this technology is really while it's been around for a while, and companies like i2 Technologies back in the mid-90s, the reality is, and it's been slow to come, I think that memory resident technologies are going to be a real game changer as we move forward here over the next 5 years, where that adoption will be widespread and there will be lots of opportunities to leverage analytics in a far broader spectrum of applications and use cases.
I agree with you. Thank you. Phil, to wrap up the analytics discussion, we talk a lot about optimization and simulation and predictive analytics and collaborative planning, and it's not just trade but other processes. Tony mentioned supply chain planning on the supply chain side, inventory optimization. So how do companies know what to look for? Should optimization always be the ultimate goal? And how do they know when they're ready for some of the more advanced capabilities?
That's a great question, and I'll say that, if I can quote the old Watergate, investigators, follow the money. So when you're looking at your top-line revenue, what is it that's bleeding your top line? What is it that's restricting your growth? Where do you see the inefficiencies in your organization? And ask yourself the question that if I had perfect knowledge of what was going to happen from a prescriptive or predictive model, how would I change my operations? We all know that supply chains are horribly inelastic, and looking for an elastic supply chain just doesn't happen out there. But what you can do is predict what's going to happen as far as your demand signal is going to be in all of your retail channels and get ahead of the curve. So the ability to make investments in technology to allow companies to get ahead of the curve and understand exactly what's going to happen 30, 60, 90 days out as far as what's going to go, what's going to sell through what channel is really the name of the game. And I'll switch a topic for just a second, and I'll give an example of a conversation that I had. I have a daughter who's in her 20s, and she's in graduate school, and she came by to visit last night, and she was working on her tablet, and I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm shopping." I said, "Oh," I said, "Are you on Amazon?" She goes, "No, I'm on Pinterest." I said, "Oh, Pinterest, that's kind of the pin-up of ideas kind of location." She said, "Yep, I'm going to Pinterest because I'm looking for creative ideas where I can take those ideas and go to a thrift store and buy old clothing and dress up that old clothing by looking at the creative ideas in Pinterest. And then I said, I wonder if you could make a business out of that. She goes, absolutely. You could take all of these great crowdsourcing ideas in Pinterest, apply them to old clothing, make new designs out of it, and then sell it on the eBay store. And she goes, I have friends that are actually doing that. So all of a sudden you see this mix and match of e-commerce and tablets and retail stores, and you realize that all these buying decisions by young people who our manufacturers really want to target are influenced in lots of different ways through electric commerce. And I think that's where the future is headed. And it's up to manufacturers to decide how to take advantage of that.
Not only take advantage of it, but how are they going to react when it happens? So something else that you said, that I just want to repeat because it's something I always heard. I always heard Jake Barr at P&G say, hey, even if I had all the data in the world, what would I do with it? And companies have to realize that if they can't react within 8 hours, it doesn't make sense to get that data so frequently. So you really need to figure out what your execution capabilities are on the other end before it becomes all about the data. So they really have to be balanced. Okay, so I have one final question for all three of my panelists. I want you guys to look into your crystal ball, and if I was able to wave my magic wand and give all consumer goods companies a huge chunk of money, let's say, I don't know, $5 million, $10 million for a new initiative, what would you recommend that they invested in? What should that initiative be? What business process can technology really have the biggest impact on? So Steve, we'll start with you.
So for my money, there's two things that consumer goods companies need to do going forward. They need to get a hold of their operations, and so I think there are technologies that allow them to do that. I think we talked about a couple here in and around understanding your business through analytics, optimizing by getting a hold of predictive outcomes. That actually drives the ability for a company to invest or build a war chest or at least build a little bit of margin in an area where they're bleeding margin in order to innovate. Because those technologies that drive innovation, the things that are how do you source where good ideas are coming for and then how do you monetize them, I think that's where the play has to be made. It's a two-step, so I'm cheating on your answer, Kara, a little bit here, but I think there needs to be the ability to get that operation in control, and there's some great analytics and optimization technologies that are coming into play, and that's where the investment has to start. But the point of doing that is not to improve the margin. The point of doing that is to position yourself for real growth by leveraging innovation technologies. Right, and growth is the goal. Perfect, thank you. Okay, Tony, where would you spend that whirlwind of money?
Well, if I had a big war chest right now, I would be focusing predominantly on analytics and looking at sentiment data through social, and I would be using that data in order to really market to consumers and drive top line. And so I think that a lot of effort has been spent here over the last decade focused on standardizing ERP. I would be focusing on how do we use analytics to drive top line, and in addition to that, as a separate related item to me would be around e-commerce and really understanding sales through e-commerce and what we could do to drive more volume through e-commerce. Perfect. And Phil?
So I would probably give some of my money to my daughter to start a new business interest. But other than that, I think that the proper investment in understanding what's going to happen in the future to your customers and to your channels of distribution, and being able to make very accurate bets about what's going to happen and be able to impact your supply chain ahead of time, and having that connection between consumers and retail channels and supply chain and marketing, a very tightly connected series of relationships that is proven to be mathematically sound within statistical advantages, like within under a half of a standard deviation, will allow businesses to make these kinds of multi-million-dollar bets with a great deal of certainty, knowing what their ROI is going to be, knowing that they're going to gain market share, and really disintermediating their competition through technology.
And you didn't actually use the word analytics, but everybody else did, so I agree that's part of the investment. Okay, so I want to thank everybody for your participation today. I want to thank my three speakers, Steve Smith from Gartner, Tony Bender of Edgewell Personal Care, and Phil Hodson from Sama Technologies. Again, a replay will be available on our website. The slides and the report itself are available, and I thank you for your time. Have a great afternoon, everybody.